Christy Bateson and her husband Charlie were high school sweethearts.
We actually got pretty serious pretty quickly.
They just seemed to make an ideal couple.
They seemed to be very happy.
But a brutal crime cut their happiness short.
He'd been shot while he was sleeping.
The case remained unsolved for almost a decade.
It's going to be a cold case.
But then, Christy made a shocking confession.
I don't know if he's like snapped.
Had the truth finally come out?
She knew Charlie would give her a divorce.
Or had the mother of three made a tragic mistake?
False confessions happened.
The sheriff's department had coerced her.
I just thought that if I told them what they wanted to hear, they would leave me alone.
Redding, California, April 17, 1992. It was a little past noon on Friday as 22-year-old Christy Bateson waited in a mall parking lot with her two daughters, a 4-month-old and a 3-year-old.
My mom took us to Redding that morning to just run errands and to let my dad sleep because he worked a night shift.
She took the kids to a playground where they often went in Redding and hung out at the playground for a little while, then went to the mall.
At around 11:30, Christy and her girls left the mall, but they couldn't drive home.
The tire was flat on the car, so I went inside and used the payphone and tried calling home.
Christy's husband, Charlie, hadn't answered the phone, however.
She would turn off the ringer sometimes to let him sleep.
Unable to get Charlie on the phone, Christy called a friend and asked her to drop by their house and knock on the door.
She said no problem, she would go, send him down.
Then Christy and the girls waited for her husband to make the drive from their home in Bernie, a small town about 50 miles from Redding.
The girls and I just kind of walked around a little bit and, just waited for him to come down. I mean, it's about 45-minute drive, 45 minutes to an hour.
However, it was over an hour before someone arrived. And it wasn't Charlie.
Instead, her grandmother comes and says, I have to talk to you.
She told me that Charlie had been killed.
The friend Christy had sent to the house had found him still in his bed, a single gunshot wound to his right temple.
She found Charlie asleep with, the sheets pulled up against him, and it was clear he'd been shot while he was sleeping.
Christy appeared shocked by the news that her husband was dead.
I fainted. I still have the knot on my knee where I hit the cement.
But what Christy didn't expect was that the search for Charlie's killer and the questions about her involvement would last for nearly 20 years. Christy Conley was born and raised in Bernie, California, a town nestled in the mountains of the scenic Cascade Range.
We're way up, almost to the Oregon border, about 3,000 people, small town.
It's definitely just its own little mountain community area. Nice folks, nice place to be, a nice place to visit. You love the outdoors, you probably love Bernie.
It was the perfect backdrop for an idyllic childhood.
Christy, as a little girl, was very active in sports. She wasn't exactly a tomboy, but she, didn't like me fooling with her hair or that type of thing. She'd rather just be just a little girl and play.
I was a pretty good kid. I wasn't like I was getting in trouble or anything in school.
Christy's teenage years wouldn't be entirely free of trouble, however. In 1984, the high school sophomore started dating a senior named Charlie Bateson.
He played football, and I cheered. I was a cheerleader in high school, so, I knew him from games and stuff like that.
They just seemed to make an ideal couple.
I was happy. He treated her very well, and they got along.
In fact, Christy's family was so happy about the match that it wasn't long before they were treating Charlie like part of the family.
We actually got pretty serious pretty quickly. We spent a lot of time together, and he would go on trips, like with my family and stuff.
However, the teenage romance did have a stormy side.
They had a few ups and downs, as every couple does. Finally decided that he was the one for her.
In February of 1988, Christy and Charlie, now 18 and 21, made another trip to a Reno wedding chapel. But this time, it was no secret.
Our families were there. We had a friend stand up for each of us.
Married once more, the couple returned to Boerne and quickly settled down.
Charlie worked at the mill located in Boerne. Just your basic sawmill, I guess, log mill.
It was a good paying job. Worked a lot of hours.
Charlie made enough to support the two of them, but he and Christy were determined to expand their family.
We decided to have kids right away, and our first daughter was born the following year. She was born in March of 1989.
Then, in November of 1991, Christy gave birth to the couple's second daughter.
She was just the perfect mother. I don't know. She just has always made me think of somebody that wanted a family life.
Charlie was just as thrilled.
He loved it. He loved them girls.
He was a very good father. They seemed to be very happy.
However, as happy as Christy and Charlie were, their growing family soon outgrew their means.
We weren't being able to save money.
And that meant putting their dreams for the future on indefinite hold.
We wanted to buy our own home.
With two small children, Christy helped earn money when she could.
I did some daycare out of my house, and I worked in the nursery up at one of the churches. But other than that, my main focus was, my girls and my husband.
Still, the couple wasn't making enough to cover their basic expenses.
They were a little behind in their bills.
But just as their hopes of saving enough money to buy a home appeared out of reach, Christy's grandmother came through with a solution. In the spring of 1992, she told Christy and Charlie there was about to be a vacancy in a rental property she owned.
My grandmother had told us that she was going to be evicting the people that lived in a house behind her house.
Her grandmother not only suggested that Christy and Charlie move into the house, she offered them an incredible deal.
She said that we could live there rent-free, give us a chance to come up with the money for a down payment for a home of our own.
However, there were a couple of drawbacks to the plan, starting with the previous tenants.
The grandmother had been told by some neighbors that the previous tenants were dealing drugs.
Her grandma kicked them out and said they'd drive up and down the road, and stare and everything else,
The other challenge was the size of the house.
And it was very small. It had a living room, a kitchen, and one bedroom.
Most bathrooms are bigger than this bedroom. There was barely enough room in the bedroom for a twin bed.
However, despite its shortcomings, a free house was an offer the cash-strapped family could hardly refuse.
We thought that we would be able to make that work, for a few months or a year.
Determined to tough it out, Christy and Charlie moved into the house at the beginning of April 1992.
I thought that would be an excellent way for them to save money.
The tight living quarters did require some adjustments, though. Christy's daughters took the tiny bedroom. Christy slept on a fold-out bed in the living room. And Charlie, working the graveyard shift at the sawmill, slept wherever he could.
He would come home from work early in the morning, and if the kids were awake, then he would bring them out to me, and he would go into the bedroom and sleep in our daughter's bed. Otherwise, he would sleep with me for an hour and then go in there once they did wake up.
But even with the bedroom door shut, the girls would often wake their father up. So Christy arranged outings most mornings.
Christy had begun taking the two kids in the car out to the mall or a park or something so that she could keep the house quiet so Charlie could sleep.
By April 17th, after just 2 weeks in their cramped rental, the family had already fallen into a routine. Charlie had come home at around 3 a.m. that morning and slept a few hours on the fold-out beside Christy before the girls woke up at around 7.
He brought them out to me, and then he went into the bed and went to sleep.
Then, after making breakfast for her daughters, Christy loaded the girls into the car and drove the 45 minutes to nearby Reading.
I took them to the park for just a little bit. I mean, my 3-year-old, she lost interest pretty quick. So then after that, we went to the mall and just walked around the mall a little bit.
An hour or so later, at around 11:30, Christy and the girls left the mall.
She noticed she had a flat tire, so she called home.
Charlie didn't answer the phone.
She remembered it. She turned the ringer down so that Charlie could sleep.
So Christy called a friend and asked her to go to the house. But what she found there would change Christy's life forever. Coming up, Charlie is found dead.
There was blood all over the place.
And suspicion turns to Christy.
Do you have a boyfriend?
Bernie, California, April 17, 1992. It was about 11:45 when a friend of Christy Bateson's pulled up outside the tiny rental home she shared with her husband, Charlie. Christy was in nearby Reading, stuck at the mall with a flat tire.
She called home to get Charlie to come down to Reading. He wasn't answering.
So, unable to reach Charlie, Christy had called a friend.
She asked her to go and knock on the door and tell Charlie that she needed help because she had a flat tire.
But when Christy's friend knocked on their front door, Charlie didn't answer.
She hears the alarm going off that Christy had set for 11:30 for Charlie to wake him up.
Worried that something might be wrong, Christy's friend tried the front door. Finding it unlocked, she walked inside the house and made a horrifying discovery in the home's only bedroom.
There was blood all over the place.
In the middle of the bloody scene, sprawled on his daughter's bed, was Charlie. He had been killed by a single gunshot to the head.
The gunshot wound sprayed blood and brain matter all over the bedroom.
Christy's friend called 911. Soon, the tiny house was crawling with sheriff's deputies. There was no sign of forced entry, but investigators did find what appeared to be a promising clue.
There was a palm print found on the door to the bedroom.
But in Charlie's truck, parked outside in the driveway, they also found something puzzling. Charlie's rifle was missing.
Charlie kept the truck locked all the time because he kept his rifle in there. Charlie always kept it behind the seat away from the kids.
Was it possible Charlie had been killed with his own gun? While the medical examiner removed his body for autopsy, the investigators turned to Christy for answers. By then, Christy's grandmother had arrived at the Reading Mall to inform the 22-year-old that her husband was dead.
When she tells Christy the news, Christy faints.
I don't remember much after that. And the next thing I do remember, I was in the police station. I was in like a small room. That's what I remember. And the police were questioning me.
She can hear her kids crying outside of the door.
My 3-year-old was asking for me.
In the interview, Christy told the investigators that she and the girls had left the house at around 8 that morning.
Did you go in and wake Charlie up? Did you talk to him?
No, I told him before he went into bed that me and the boss were going to come down to Reading.
Asked who might have reason to kill her husband, Christy said she had no idea. Although she did explain the problems her grandmother had with the previous tenant of their rental house.
She thinks they did drugs. Because she said there were cars in and out of there all the time.
Investigators also pressed Christy for details of her relationship with Charlie.
Everything's pretty smooth with you then? Yeah. Do you have a boyfriend? Yeah.
Then, the investigators asked Christy about Charlie's behavior.
They asked her if, he drank or took drugs or if he might have been having an affair.
There's no jealous husbands anywhere, is there?
Husband.
I mean, your husband's not having an affair with some other woman someplace.
No, not to my knowledge. He wouldn't have time.
She's just so shocked by these questions.
Finally, at the end of the interview, the investigators allowed Christy to leave.
I remember my grandparents putting me into the car, and it was dark outside. So as for how long I was in there, I really don't have any idea.
But just because the investigators let Christy go, that didn't mean they had ruled her out as a suspect.
There for a while, Christy was the person of interest.
When someone is killed and they have a spouse, the first suspect is always the spouse. And that's where they seem to get hung up.
The suspicion surrounding Christy only deepened when the crime scene investigators recovered the bullet that killed Charlie, a .30 caliber rifle round.
There were at least 27 rifle makes that could have fired the shot.
One of them was Charlie's gun. And since it was missing, there was no way investigators could rule it out as the murder weapon.
There was never any ability to compare the slug with a gun that might have fired it.
However, there were two pieces of evidence that seemed to point to someone other than Christy. One was the mysterious palm print on the bedroom door.
They never identified the source. The house had just been cleaned and painted between when the previous tenants left and when Christy and Charlie moved in, so there wasn't a lot of fingerprint evidence that they couldn't track to the two of them.
The other had to do with the home's bloody bedroom.
Whoever did this had to have gotten blood on them, quite a lot of blood.
There was nothing ever found on her clothing, nothing in the car that she'd been in for more than an hour that morning.
There was not a drop of blood anywhere.
But the fact that there was no blood on Christy's clothes or in her car didn't deter the investigators.
They kept their focus on Christy, looking for evidence of hiding materials that could have had blood on it.
The investigators did look into the possibility that she or whoever did the killing had cleaned themselves. They took the pipes out of the house. They probed them for any blood residue or even trace amounts of forensic evidence that would point to Christy.
And when that failed to produce any results, they asked Christy to take a polygraph.
My husband asked, well, couldn't they wait to do it at a different time because we were getting ready for the funeral? And they told us that no, they had to do it right away.
Once again, the polygraph failed to produce any indication that Christy was Charlie's killer.
The polygraph was completely normal. None of it produced any, suggestion that she was not telling the truth.
In fact, the investigators would soon begin to wonder whether Christy had been on to something in her interrogation when she mentioned that the house's previous tenants had been dealing drugs.
There were reports to the sheriff's department within a couple days of the murder of Charlie Bateson that this was a drug hit that had gone wrong.
Confidential informants apparently told officers what they had heard around town.
That one of the dealers who lived in the house had cheated somebody, and it was this guy who came back to exact revenge.
Had Charlie's death simply been a case of mistaken identity? The investigators found little evidence to support that theory.
They didn't result in any interrogations or arrests.
I said, "Yous are looking in the wrong place." Because down deep, I thought she done it.
But the investigators hadn't turned up any evidence against Christy either.
Eventually, the police stopped questioning Christy.
Weeks passed, then months, and the murder of Charlie Bateson moved into the Shasta County Sheriff's Office cold case file.
They said they didn't have no leads or nothing.
With Charlie gone, Christy had no way to support her two small children. So she moved in with her parents as she struggled to put the tragedy behind her.
Her main concern was her daughters and taking care of them, and she wasn't sure what she was going to do or how she was going to manage.
There were many, many days that I just stayed in bed or just, sat in a chair and stared out the window.
But after a year had passed, Christy decided it was time to move on with her life.
I heard my dad tells someone something to the effect that I hope she's going to be okay, I realized that I needed to put myself together, you know, maybe not for me, but for my girls.
While visiting relatives, Christy was reunited with Troy Lunbury, the young man she had dated during her breakup with Charlie back in high school. And in the spring of 1994, 2 years after Charlie's death, 24-year-old Christy gave birth to their daughter, Megan. She married Troy a month later.
It just didn't feel right how long it was afterwards.
Was the rekindled romance a motive for murder? That's what Charlie's father thought.
She knew Charlie wouldn't give her a divorce. He'd fight for them kids.
But when Frank Bateson took his suspicions to the authorities, they told him there was little they could do. They had found no evidence connecting Christy to the crime.
I said it was her. The police told me, well, the only way we'll ever find that out is if she confesses to it.
Coming up, cold case investigators look into Charlie's murder.
2 detectives came to my door.
And they turn up the heat on Christy.
Tell us what you did to Charlie, because we know.
By 2001, Christy Lunbury's first husband, Charlie Bateson, had been dead for nearly 9 years. His murder officially unsolved.
The investigation went for a while, then everything dropped and it seemed like it was just going to be a cold case.
In the years since Charlie's murder, Christy, now 32, had managed to rebuild her life. She'd not only married an old boyfriend named Troy Lunbury, she'd also launched a new career.
I passed the state test to become a certified nurse's assistant.
Christy had worked at a local hospital for several years before shifting to home-based care for the disabled.
I could do it out of my home and, still be there for my girls.
By 2001, her daughters with Charlie were 10 and 12, while her daughter with Troy had just turned 7.
I remember all my friends always wanting to come and have sleepovers at my house because they loved my mom, and she was always like a mother figure to my other friends too. They always called her Mama Christy.
But on December 20th, 2001, 5 days before Christmas, Christy's life was about to unravel once again.
2 detectives came to my door and they said that they were going over old cases, cold cases.
About 10 years ago, cold cases became quite the rage with law enforcement.
Generally, the renewed interest was due to breakthroughs in forensic DNA analysis. But since there was no DNA to analyze in the Bateson case, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office fell back on more traditional methods.
There was a new homicide chief at the Sheriff's Department, and he wanted to clear up some of the cold cases. So he reassigned them to a number of detectives and said, go out and, shake the bushes and see what you can find out.
Those marching orders had sent the investigators straight to Christy's door.
They just wondered if they could come in and talk to me a little bit and, just that they were re-interviewing everyone. So I said, sure, no problem.
Christy invited the detectives in, completely, agreeable to being questioned about it.
At first, the interview appeared to be routine.
The 2 detectives started out their questioning with just going over my statements from 10 years earlier.
They didn't suggest at the onset that they still suspected her.
But in the middle of the almost 2-hour interview, something changed.
The tone changed very drastically.
I have to be honest with you, the story's a little inconsistent about the mall, not the flat tire stuff. But not all together, it's not bad enough.
He just started kind of saying that they didn't really, believe what I was saying, and they knew that I had done this, and I just started feeling very uncomfortable.
Sensing that Christy was growing uncomfortable, the detectives pressured her to confess.
For God's sake, tell us the truth about what you did to Charlie, because we know.
They kept saying, we know you did it. We have witnesses who will testify to this. Why don't you just admit it and make it easier on your family? And they started suggesting that, her children could be taken away from her if she didn't, come forward and admit that she did this.
The train is leaving the station, and you don't want to miss it.
They were saying that basically if I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear, that they were going to take my kids away from me.
And then, once Christy was convinced that her children's future was on the line, they pressed once more for a confession.
Straight up, did you shoot Charlie? Yeah. Did anybody else help you with this or plan this with you?
No, it wasn't.
According to Christy, shooting Charlie had been a spur-of-the-moment decision.
I don't know if you said snap. I don't know what I did.
But if Christy had shot Charlie, she appeared to be a bit fuzzy on the details.
They asked her, what was the weapon you used? And she said she didn't know.
Did you shoot him with his rifle?
I don't know if it was,
Was it the rifle where was it when you got it? In the house, or did you get it out of his truck?
No, I think it was in the closet.
Where she'd found the murder weapon wasn't all that Christy appeared unclear on either.
Where were your children when you shot Charlie?
I guess in the house. That's what I mean. I don't remember.
All she claimed to know was that she was sorry for what she had done.
I wish every day I could get that.
Christy had just confessed to murder, and that meant she would face charges for the death of her first husband. But not just yet.
Are you going to be okay when we leave here?
Yeah.
You're not going to do anything foolish, are you?
Christy said no, and as soon as the detectives left, she called her mother.
She said that she thought she told him that she had killed Charlie.
But that didn't mean it was true, according to Christy.
I'm not the type of person who is going to confront someone or stand up to someone basically and tell them to get out of my house. That's not how I was raised. So I just thought that if I told them what they wanted to hear, they would leave me alone and it would go away.
People think, well, who would ever confess to a murder if you didn't do it? It just sounds totally unreasonable. It happens a lot.
On the day after Christmas, the authorities contacted Christy and asked that she turn herself in.
They actually told me that I could either come to the police station in Bernie or that they would come to my house and cuff me in front of my kids.
My husband just took her down to the police station.
Christy's two oldest daughters stayed with their grandparents, but Christy's husband, Troy, took their daughter and moved out.
The day my mom was arrested, my dad packed up our stuff, and me and him moved to Nebraska.
Christy's marriage was over, and after she was released on bail awaiting her trial, she spent the next 2 years building her defense.
Their defense was that the sheriff's department had coerced her into a confession.
Certain people are very susceptible to the pressure of, police interrogators, and just to kind of make it all go away, they'll say what the investigators want them to say.
It was a description that fit Christy perfectly, according to Dr. Richard Offshee, the Berkeley sociologist consulted by the defense.
She would be a prime candidate to be the kind of person who would give a false confession. She is not a person who confronts people. She's very passive.
So when her case went to trial on March 17, 2004, Christy fully expected to be acquitted.
I did believe in the justice system and that everything would be okay.
But halfway through the trial, Christy says her attorneys chose not to call in the expensive expert witness.
They chose not to call Dr. Offshee in my defense. I was really surprised that was the basis of the case.
That wasn't the only blow to Christy's defense either.
They did not allow into the trial any of the reports that had been made to the sheriff's department about potential, drug dealer involvement, or this being the result of a, mistaken identity.
Which left the jury with one lingering question.
Who would say that they killed somebody if they hadn't?
Coming up, the jury returns with a verdict.
I wasn't sure if I heard them right.
And Christy faces her future.
I thought she was going to be gone forever.
On April 8, 2004, 34-year-old Christy Lunbury was awaiting the verdict in her murder trial. In 2001, she had confessed to the 1992 murder of her first husband, Charlie Bateson, a confession she later claimed was false.
This was all part of a sort of a breakdown that she had while she was being interrogated.
But without an alternative explanation for the murder or psychiatric testimony to back up the defense's claim that the confession was false, the jury found Christy guilty of second-degree murder.
I felt numb. My stomach just dropped. I wasn't sure if I heard them right.
And on May 14th, the judge sentenced Christy to a prison term of 19 years to life.
We thought that it was going to be okay, and it wasn't.
There were a lot of things that were not admitted in her trial that could have helped her.
One was evidence that Charlie's murder may have been a case of mistaken identity. The other was a sociologist's opinion that Christy's confession was false.
If the trial attorneys had presented the expert testimony to explain the false confessions happened and argued this other evidence, I think she would have been acquitted.
Christy maintained her innocence and pinned her hopes on an appeal.
I actually never thought that I would be there forever. And I always felt that because I knew that I didn't do it.
But could she convince an appeals court? Christy decided to contact Juliana Draus, a San Francisco attorney with a passion for cases like Christy's.
When I went to law school, being, a product of the 60s, I went with these high ideals to fight injustice. And the greatest injustice is when an innocent person gets convicted.
After Juliana met Christy in person, she agreed to take the case.
She is a very sweet, really wonderful person, which is one of the reasons why I fought for her like I did.
And after contacting Dr. Richard Offsheet, the sociologist who had evaluated Christy's confession, Juliana became even more convinced that she had been wrongly convicted.
And he said, this is the worst confession I've seen. And he was really angry about the whole horrible thing to have happened to Christy.
Starting with Dr. Offsheet's opinion that Christy's confession was false, Juliana spent several weeks drafting a petition to overturn the verdict in Christy's trial.
The heart of the petition was that her lawyers, where the only evidence was this ridiculous confession, should have presented Dr. Offsheet to tell the jury that false confessions happen.
But the sociologist's opinion wasn't all that Christy and her attorney pinned their hopes on. There was also the bloody palm print.
Her lawyers should have been allowed to present this evidence. And if they had, there's a good chance that she would not have been convicted.
Then, when the petition was complete, Juliana began the process of getting it through the courts.
Juliana would just reassure me that it's a procedure and these are steps that we need to take and these things take time.
After being denied by the California courts, Juliana took Christy's case to federal court.
It was filed in the district court in Sacramento. We lost there.
After each appeal was denied, I always, just got just a sinking feeling in my stomach.
But Juliana wasn't ready to give up. In 2010, 4 years after she initially took on Christy's case, the attorney appealed the district court's decision to the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco.
She just did not let go of the case.
It's awful for an innocent person to be in prison for a crime they didn't commit.
While Juliana fought to have her conviction overturned, Christy and her family struggled to stay connected.
We tried to take the girls at least once a month to visit with her mom,
which was about a 1,000-mile round trip.
But their mother's incarceration took its toll on Christy's daughters.
It was hard. We all had to grow up a lot.
I was so used to my mom tucking me in and getting me ready, and all of a sudden my dad had to start taking care of me, and I wasn't used to that.
As the years wore on, the girls began to lose hope.
We just figured, she wouldn't be there for weddings or kids or anything.
I thought she was going to be gone forever.
But if Christy ever doubted she'd eventually be reunited with her daughters, she didn't show it when her family visited her in prison.
He said, "How come every time I come down here, you're always smiling?" She says, "I choose to be happy." She's a very strong woman.
She never quit. When she was in prison, she did not quit.
Neither did her attorney. And on May 25, 2010, more than 6 years after Christy's conviction, their persistence finally paid off.
The Ninth Circuit reversed Christy's conviction.
As soon as the ruling came down, Juliana called Christy with the news.
She actually had to say my name a couple times because I just was silent on the phone, I was just trying to think if I really heard what she just said.
Christy's conviction had been overturned, but not the original indictment. She would be retried for Charlie's murder.
The appeals court did not invalidate the confession. They cited some problems with it and a lot of reasons to suspect that it was given under pressure. They let that stand.
But for the moment, released on bail while awaiting retrial, Christy was finally reunited with her daughters after 6 long years in prison.
I stood there for a second and looked at her, and then I just ran up to her and hugged her when I saw her for the first time. The first week was kind of like a dream. I would wake up at least and first thing check to make sure she was still there.
Coming up, Christy faces another trial.
I did not want to be away from my daughters anymore.
And she makes a tough decision.
We just wanted it all to be over.
On March 28, 2011, almost 7 years after she had been found guilty of murdering her first husband, Charlie Bateson, 41-year-old Christy Lunbury was back in a Shasta County, California courtroom. In 2010, a federal appeals court had overturned the 2004 conviction that had sent her to prison.
The Ninth Circuit sent the case back to the state court,
which meant that Christy still faced a murder charge.
They were planning to try her a second time for her husband's murder.
And since Christy had admitted to killing her husband, an acquittal wasn't assured, despite the fact that she had later recanted the confession.
It's really hard for jurors to believe that somebody would confess to doing something they hadn't done.
But would Christy's fate be up to a jury? Shortly before her trial was scheduled to begin, the prosecutors approached her attorney with a deal.
The DA came up with an offer that if she pled no contest to a manslaughter, that she would receive credit for the time already served.
But for Christy, even a no contest plea felt like an admission of guilt.
She was really uncomfortable pleading no contest because she knew she didn't do it.
However, with credit for time served, Christy would be eligible for immediate parole.
It meant that I would not be going back to prison. I did not want to be away from my daughters anymore. I didn't want to miss anything else in their lives.
I was scared that she wouldn't be heard again and that things would go on like they did before and that she would be taken away from us.
So when Christy came to court that Monday morning, it wasn't to stand trial. Instead, she entered a plea of no contest to a charge of manslaughter.
Christy's plea was the only option she actually had if she wanted to come back home and be with her family.
We just wanted it all to be over.
But while Christy's family welcomed the outcome, Charlie's father was outraged.
How can you sentence somebody to 19 years to life and let them out in 6 years? It just ain't right.
Since her release, Christy has tried to move on with her life, reconnecting with an old high school classmate.
I got married in July of 2011 to a great guy. We just want to live a, peaceful, normal life.
She's a loving, caring person, and life means a lot to her and everybody around her.
It's what she deserves, according to her family.
We know, that Christy is innocent.
But there are others who still believe that Christy essentially got away with murder.
You can say what you want. I still think that she done it.
Humans are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine, but when blood ties are involved, the motive usually boils down to the oldest sin in the book, which is greed. I tell you, you spend decades walking through the darkest corners of the human mind, and yet nothing. Chills the bone, quite like a child turning on the very person who gave them life. The date is February 4th, 1991, and we are in LaGrange, Georgia, a picturesque height. Knit town where everyone knows your name, your business, and your secrets. Margaret Abernathy is a 66-year-old matriarch, a titan of her community. She is generous, dignified, a successful businesswoman who built an empire of car dealerships and real estate alongside her late husband. She is the kind of woman who hands out buckets of vegetables from her farm and opens her checkbook whenever her children need a safety net. She loved her family with a fierce, unconditional devotion, and how is she repaid? With a small caliber bullet to the back of the head. At roughly 12:30 in the afternoon, a 911 call comes in. The caller is Priscilla Matula, the 41-year-old daughter of Margaret. Priscilla tells the dispatcher her mother is hurt, lying in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor. When first responders arrive, Margaret is barely clinging to life, making agonal snoring sounds. The initial assumption is a home invasion, a burglary gone terribly wrong. But I have stood in enough blood-soaked rooms to know when a scene is lying to me. The emergency. Room doctors find 2 gunshot wounds to the head of Margaret, and the house instantly transforms into an active crime scene. Priscilla paints a picture of a frantic morning. She claims she went to work between 7:20 and 7:30, left for the bank and post office. Found the lines too long and drove around aimlessly. She provides an excessive amount of detail. My. When a witness gives you a minute-by-minute itinerary of their morning commute without being asked, they are not remembering, they are reciting a script. They are trying to sell you a bridge, and I am not in the market. We look at the house. The front door is locked. The back door has a broken pane of glass, supposedly the point of entry. But the glass fragments are on the outside of the door, meaning it was broken from the inside. And the hole is too small for a human hand to reach through and unlock anything. You have to be kidding me. If you are going to stage a crime scene, at least put some effort into it. Inside drawers are pulled open, their contents neatly placed on the floor. Real burglars are chaotic, destructive creatures who tear a house apart looking for valuables. They do not carefully organize your socks. Certain items are missing, like a mink coat, expensive jewelry, and a small derringer. Yet televisions and electronics are left untouched. This was no random intruder. This was a poorly executed theater production directed by someone who had free reign of the property. The family points the finger at everyone but themselves. They suggest a gentle giant named Diaka, a boarder, who cared for the late husband of Margaret. We track him down. He slipped away from work for a job interview at another dealership because he was afraid of being fired. His alibi is ironclad, and he weeps for Margaret as if she were his own grandmother. Next, the husband of Priscilla, Nick, tries to throw his brother-in-law Alec under the bus, claiming Alec was drowning in debt and waiting for his inheritance. But Alec was at work all morning surrounded by witnesses. So we turn our gaze back to the grieving daughter. The veil of deception begins to lift when a teller from a local bank makes an anonymous call. Just 2 days prior, on a Saturday, Margaret marched into bank, physically agitated and entirely inconsolable. She demanded that Priscilla be immediately removed from all business accounts. The bank did not have personnel to process the request that day, so Margaret vowed to return. First thing Monday morning. She never made it. We follow the money, and the truth reveals its ugly face. Margaret had put up her own home as collateral to help Priscilla and Nick buy a dealership. But Priscilla was running the business into the ground. Desperate to maintain the illusion of success, Priscilla engaged in a massive check-kiting scheme, robbing Peter to pay Paul to the tune of $30,000. She was faking vehicle sales, bouncing checks between banks to float fake cash. Margaret, a shrewd and meticulous businesswoman, caught wind of the discrepancies. Imagine the absolute heartbreak of that mother realizing the child she nurtured and supported was robbing her blind and jeopardizing the family legacy. Margaret confronted her. She told Priscilla that the financial pipeline was being shut off permanently. Priscilla had 48 hours to contemplate her ruin. She faced a choice: either own up to her failures and face the consequences, or eliminate the obstacle. She chose the latter. The psychology of this decision is staggering. Priscilla stripped away every ounce of humanity, viewing her mother not as a parent but as an audit. That needed to be canceled. On Monday morning, Priscilla did not go to work. A convenience store clerk places her near the home of her mother right after 7 in the morning. A woman viewing a rental property across the street spots the vehicle of Priscilla in the driveway of Margaret between 10 and 10:30. That same woman heard a gunshot echo through the quiet morning air. The autopsy tells the most horrific part of this tragedy. Margaret was shot twice. The first bullet struck her while she was in bed, but it did not penetrate her skull. If left alone, she would have survived. The blood evidence shows that Margaret woke up wounded, terrified, and managed to drag herself to the bathroom. She used toilet paper to try and stop her own bleeding. There was a significant gap in time between the first shot and the second. Priscilla shot her own mother, left her for dead, and then returned hours later. She walked into that bathroom, looked down at the woman who gave her life, who held her as a baby, who financed her dreams, and saw she was still breathing. Instead of calling for help, Priscilla raised a small caliber weapon and fired a second round directly into the brain stem of Margaret, extinguishing her life. That level of cold-blooded cruelty is beyond comprehension. It is a terrifying descent into darkness where greed completely overrides the maternal bond. As the trial approaches, Priscilla makes one final pathetic attempt to save herself. She calls a convenience store clerk, trying to gaslight the witness into changing her story. We are listening on a wiretap. She is pushy, cagey, desperately trying to manipulate the timeline. It does not work. You can lie to yourself, you can lie to your family, but you cannot lie to the evidence. The jury saw right through her carefully constructed facade. In August of 1992, Priscilla Matula was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. She traded the life of her mother for a temporary delay on a bounce check. The tragedy is that she did not just kill Margaret, she murdered her entire family. The Sunday dinners, the vacations, the legacy, all of it vanished the moment she pulled that trigger. Margaret Abernathy deserved to spend her twilight years surrounded by the love she so freely gave. Instead, she died on a cold bathroom floor, staring into the soulless eyes of her own daughter. I tell you, the depth of human depravity will never cease to appall me. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most bizarre reasons you can imagine, but sometimes they kill because the weight of Their own existence simply becomes too heavy to bear. I tell you, murder is always an ugly business, but every once in a while you come across a case that breaks your heart before it makes your blood boil. It was May of 2005 in St. Petersburg, Florida. It is a beautiful, sleepy city by the water, mostly a quiet haven for retirees. A place where people go to live out their golden years in peace. But on Yellow Pine Drive, inside a foreclosed mobile home, there was no peace. Just the overwhelming, unmistakable stench of death. A cleaning crew hired by the bank walked into that trailer and found themselves stepping into a nightmare. They were just trying to clear out left-behind trash and Star Wars memorabilia, but the smell drove them toward the last bedroom. The door was shut. When they opened it, they found a mattress covered in layers of blankets. They tried to lift the bedding, and a plastic bag tore open, revealing a human foot. You have to be kidding me. You did not just stumble upon a body wrapped in sheets and plastic in a normal foreclosure. This was a makeshift tomb. When law enforcement arrived, they found a mummified corpse. The decomposition was so severe, they could not even determine the gender at first. But the crime scene told a story. There was no forced entry, no burglary, just dozens of cardboard air fresheners scattered across the dressers and closets bowls of potpourri, and open boxes of baking soda. Someone had lived in that house with a rotting corpse for weeks, desperately trying to mask the scent of their own sin. The medical examiner found a single bullet hole in the victim's forehead, execution style. We were dealing with a cold-blooded homicide. The house belonged to two sisters, Barbara Burns and Deborah Burns. Neighbors said they kept to themselves, but they gave us a crucial piece of information. The younger sister, Deborah, walked with a limp, had a twisted spine, and only 3 teeth. Mitochondrial DNA confirmed the tragic truth. The body in the bag was 40-year-old Deborah Burns. She had contracted scarlet fever at 2 years old, leaving her with severe neurological damage. She had the mind of a 6-year-old child. She was completely dependent, demanding, and incapable of understanding the world around her. She was a true innocent and absolute victim of fate, and somebody put a .38 caliber bullet in her brain. My, if Deborah was dead, where was her older sister Barbara? Barbara was born in 1951. Since she was 15 years old, she had been forced to drop out of school to be Deborah's nursemaid, mother and provider. For nearly 40 years, Barbara worked minimum wage jobs to keep them afloat. Then in 2001, their brother died and left them $350,000. You would think this was their salvation. But money in the hands of those who have never had it is a dangerous thing. Deborah treated the inheritance like a bottomless toy chest. Within 3 years, they blew through every single penny on trinkets, pinball machines, and online. Romance scams. The money vanished, the house went into foreclosure, and Barbara was staring down the barrel of another decade of poverty and endless servitude to a sister who was physically abusive and ungrateful. The breaking point arrived. Financial records showed someone was withdrawing Deborah's disability checks from an automated telemachine in Virginia Beach. Video surveillance caught Barbara Burns cashing those checks. She had fled the state and taken a job at a 7-Eleven. Detectives flew up to Virginia and brought her in. When they asked her if she had any siblings, she looked them dead in the eye and said she had no relatives at all. A ridiculous lie. Criminals always think they are smarter than the police, but their lies crumble the moment you apply. A little pressure. When detectives pushed her, the facade shattered. She began to cry. She claimed they had a terrible fight on August 14th, Deborah's 40th birthday. Barbara waited for Deborah to go to sleep. They shared a bed. Their heads were inches apart. Barbara listened to her sister breathe, realizing the nightmare of her life was never going to end. So she took a revolver from the dresser, pointed it at her sleeping sister's head, and pulled the trigger. She claimed she did not know what was going through her mind. She claimed she did not mean to do it. But you do not accidentally fetch a gun, aim it at a sleeping woman, and fire. That is intent. That is murder. Barbara wrapped her sister in plastic, surrounded her with air fresheners, and lived with the rotting corpse of her own flesh and blood for 6 weeks before boarding a Greyhound bus to Virginia. She took a plea deal for manslaughter and received 15 years in prison. In a twisted way, prison gave Barbara exactly what she wanted. For the first time in 40 years, she did not have to take care of anyone. Someone else cooked her meals. Someone else dictated her schedule. She was finally free. But she bought that freedom with the blood of an innocent woman. Sometimes relentless circumstances create a devil. But no matter how heavy the burden, you do not get to play God. Humans are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine. And sometimes the people paid to find the truth simply choose to look the other way. My, let me tell you about a boy named Spencer Irwin. He was a 30-year-old man fighting a battle many know too well, a brutal war with alcohol. But he was not a monster or a throwaway life. He was a man who tried to pull others out of the darkness, even while he was drowning in it himself. In August of the year 2024, the local police found him dead. He was completely naked, face down in the dirt behind a commercial loading dock. Now, a thinking man might look at a naked body in the dirt and ask a few basic questions. Where are his clothes? How did he arrive here without leaving a single footprint in the dust? But the officers who responded, they looked at him and decided he was just another transient who took too many drugs. You have to be kidding me. That is not an investigation. That is a guess, and a remarkably lazy one at that. They decided there was no story to tell. They told his grieving mother, Kelly, that her son died of an illegal drug overdose, stripped down because he was overheated, and made snow angel marks in the dirt while suffering a medical emergency. I tell you, in my decades working homicide, I have heard tall tales. But that one takes the prize for sheer incompetence. They completely refused to order an autopsy. They just drew his blood and sent him away to be cremated. When the toxicology report finally returned, well, after he was permanently turned to ash, it proved them absolutely wrong. There were no lethal drugs in his system, no methamphetamine, just a tiny fraction of alcohol. They had zero evidence of an overdose, so they simply shrugged and called it sudden cardiac death from natural causes. Natural causes do not leave you naked behind a dumpster 4 miles from your secure apartment. Kelly knew this. A mother knows her child. While the detectives sat on their hands and offered her empty platitudes, she went to work. She found surveillance footage showing a white automobile slipping into the darkness near that exact loading dock 2 nights before Spencer was found. She found a pair of his unique underwear discarded near the scene, which the police had completely ignored. She uncovered a civilian witness who explicitly saw a purple straight line on the back of Spencer's. Next morning he was found. That is a line that a competent medical examiner might have easily identified as a ligature mark. The crime scene photographs showed lividity pooling on his front, meaning he lay dead and undisturbed for a significant amount of time. The marks around his head and arms were perfectly symmetrical, not the chaotic thrashing of a dying man, but the calculated, repetitive movements of someone else, perhaps a killer sliding a heavy object or dragging a body. And then we must examine the company he kept. There was a neighbor named Tyler, known on the street as Happy. Spencer deeply believed Tyler broke into his apartment and stole his expensive computer and gaming console. A mother's relentless intuition actually found that very computer for sale on the public internet. Later on, then there was another man named Angel Gonzalez, who went by the alias Smiley. Spencer had known him for a mere 3 weeks. Spencer was trying to help Angel escape homelessness and enter rehabilitation. But when Spencer vanished, Angel was found comfortably lounging inside Spencer's locked apartment, lying to the building manager, falsely claiming Spencer was already away in a treatment facility. The cellular telephone Spencer carried abruptly stopped connecting to his mother's service plan. But his girlfriend later saw a new social media profile appear with Spencer's exact name, mysteriously attached to a string of numbers matching Angel's exact date of birth. Look closely at the psychology of the predators involved here. Predators can always smell vulnerability. Angel was a desperate transient who found a warm bed and a trusting soul. When the generous host disappeared, the parasite simply stayed put, attempting to wrap himself in the victim's life and belongings. Did Tyler come back to violently finish a dispute over stolen goods? Did Angel see a golden opportunity to take over Spencer's life permanently and silence him? We do not know for absolute certain because the individual sworn and paid to protect society decided a dead man with a history of drinking was simply not worth their valuable time. The absolute disrespect shown to this victim is sickening. The investigators wrote him off, gaslighting his grieving mother, trying to convince her that completely impossible physiological scenarios were established. Scientific facts. But they severely underestimated Kelly Irwin. She is doing the grueling job they refuse to do. The truth is out there, hiding in the deep shadows of that loading dock, hiding behind the steering wheel of a white car, hiding in the dark minds of men who call themselves happy and smiley. People lie constantly to save their own skin. Evidence does not lie. And eventually, if you dig deep enough and care enough, the dirt always gives up its secrets. You see a happy, healthy Steve running out to greet them as usual. But instead, they saw Steve lying on the sofa, wearing baggy pajamas, his face slightly pained, with a strange black liquid steaming next to him. "Good heavens, Steve, what happened to you?" Rosie exclaimed, rushing to the side of the sofa. Steve whispered, intentionally overacting to tease his sister, "I am being tormented. Rosie, Lana is making me drink some kind of poison. It is so bitter that I cannot feel my tongue anymore." At this moment, Lana walked out of the kitchen, carrying another large jug of that blackish-green water. She smiled brightly to greet everyone. Oh! Everyone came at the right time. "Nick, Rosie, do you want to try a little bit of intensive detox tea? It is very good for the liver." Nick stared at the jug of water, then looked at the large uncle who was grimacing on the sofa. He was a person who often worried, plus the fact that he had been sleep-deprived lately. His imagination suddenly took flight in a humorous way. Nick pulled Rosie into a corner and whispered, "Annie, do you see that Uncle Steve looks terrible? Is Aunt Lana forcing him to drink that stuff? Is it possible? Is she poisoning him with weeds?" Rosie laughed at the vivid imagination of her nephew. "Are you crazy? Lana is a nurse. She is taking care of his health." But to satisfy her curiosity and also to tease Lana, Rosie decided to play along with Nick, creating a small investigation right in the living room. She took the role of a serious detective, pulling out a small notebook from her handbag. "All right, Miss Lana Walsh," Rosie cleared her throat, trying to suppress a smile. "We have received an allegation that you are abusing your authority as a nurse to force a patient to drink liquids of unknown origin. Do you have any explanation?" Lana was startled for a second, then immediately caught on to the family joke. She set the jug of water on the table, put her hands on her hips, and pretended to be sharp. "Dear Detective Rosie, I completely deny this allegation. My patient here, who is lying and groaning on the couch, has a history of eating too much barbecue and staying up late to watch sports. The liquid you call unknown origin is a combination of kale, celery, ginger, and a rare herb. I am saving his life." Steve groaned from the sofa. "She is lying. She secretly puts that tea into my coffee, too. My morning coffee now tastes like the smell of soil after a downpour." The whole living room erupted in hearty laughter. Nick hit his forehead, sighing with relief, and admitted he had watched too many detective TV shows. He walked up and lifted the glass of Steve, took a small sip, and immediately grimaced, coughing. "Oh my, you are right, Uncle Steve. This is even worse than a punishment. Aunt Lana, I surrender." That afternoon passed in an incredibly warm atmosphere, filled with laughter. They cleaned the house together, helped Lana prepare a healthy dinner with salad and grilled salmon. Although Steve still grumbled about missing the greasy foods from before, deep in his heart, he knew that everything Lana did came from boundless love. A few weeks later, thanks to a light diet, those detox teas which were bitter but effective, and moderate physical activity, Steve had fully recovered. Not only that, he felt his body was lighter, his spirit refreshed, and he was much more flexible than before he was ill. He lost a few pounds of excess fat. His blood pressure was completely stable, and most importantly, the dizzy spells no longer bothered him. On Independence Day in July of that year, the Clayton family organized a large outdoor party by the lake. This time, instead of large barrels of beer and giant slabs of grilled meat, the table was filled with nutritious food, fresh fruit juice, and a little light wine. Everyone was surprised by the youthful and healthy appearance of Steve. Country music played vibrantly. Steve stepped forward, gently taking the hand of Lana and pulling her out to the middle of the lush green grass. "Please pay attention, everyone." Steve cleared his throat, raising a glass of apple juice. "Today, I want to send a special thank you to the most wonderful woman in my life. Thanks to those strange green drinks, those strict rules, and her love, I have realized that health is the most precious asset. Thank you, my Lana Sue, for enduring such a stubborn man as I am." He bent down to kiss her forehead gently amidst the applause and cheers of family and friends. Nick stood filming with his phone and laughed loudly. "I will send this video to the juice manufacturer. Uncle, you will be their representative model." This small event not only bonded the Clayton family more tightly, but also inspired them to move toward a more positive lifestyle. Realizing the great value of proactive health care, Steve and Lana decided to set aside a portion of their assets from the previous sale of the company to establish a scholarship fund. This fund specializes in providing scholarships for poor students overcoming difficulties to study nursing and physical therapy. They wanted to spread the spirit of dedication and kindness that Lana had shown, helping those with a desire to bring health to the community. A few years later, the Clayton Family Charity Fund helped hundreds of students turn their dreams into reality. Every year end, the house by Lake Wiley would be filled with thank you cards and handwritten letters containing many emotional stories from the young people they had supported. Steve no longer did business, but he found new, more meaningful, and higher purpose alongside his kind wife. In the late afternoons, when the sunset dyed the calm surface of the lake yellow, people would see the old couple holding hands and walking along the water's edge, followed by their two little dogs running happily. They did not need noisy vows. Their love was proven through every meal, every glass of herbal tea, and through the understanding and patience they had for each other. The story of Steve and Lana became a beautiful song about family, about care, and the value of health. It reminds everyone who knows them that true love does not always lie in expensive gifts or flashy trips, but lies in the presence during sickness, lies in the patience to advise each other toward better things. And sometimes, a bitter glass of tea brewed with all one's heart is the sweetest medicine to heal and nurture a life. Light from the living room window cast warm, golden streaks on the grass. From inside, the familiar hearty laugh of Steve and the gentle, deep voice of Lana echoed out, the symphony of love, of laughter, and of peace would still echo forever in their home by the lake. It was a bright and sunny day in the beautiful coastal city of Miami on the 10th of March in the year 2007. A warm ocean breeze rustled through the tall palm trees, carrying the scent of salt and celebration. On this day, a young woman prepared to walk down the aisle to marry the love of her life. She was filled with mixture of joy and a lingering, quiet sadness, for only 11 months earlier, her beloved father had passed away. In that profound moment, seeking the strength of a brother, she turned to the person who had been her guardian since childhood. There, standing with a radiant smile and eyes full of gentle wisdom, was her 52-year-old brother, Steve Clayton, ready to walk her toward her future. Steve Clayton was a man who possessed a heart as expansive as his success. In the quiet sanctuary of the wedding, when the minister asked who would give this woman to be married to this man, Steve spoke with a clear and firm voice, offering her in memory of their father. Tears flowed freely among the guests, as the love of the departed father was felt through the steadfast presence of his son. After their father passed, Steve had truly become the head of the family. Even though he had never had children of his own, he had always been a father figure to his younger siblings. When his parents were married, Steve was only about 2 or 3 years old. He had 4 sisters, and the youngest was 10 years his junior. Because of this age gap, there was never a moment when Steve was not a part of her life. He was the hero of her childhood. He played football and wrestled in high school, and to her, he was larger than life, a protector who could conquer any challenge. After completing his education, Steve graduated from college with a degree in finance. He matured rapidly, evolving into a shrewd and visionary businessman, along with a partner. He established a company that eventually became a national leader in physical therapy, with centers spread across the country. Those who knew him from those early days recalled a man who built his empire with integrity and kindness. Success brought him great wealth, yet it never diminished his spirit of generosity. His goal was to retire at the age of 40, though he missed that mark by a single year and retired at 41. With his newfound time, Steve dedicated his life to giving back. He mentored a vast group of young men, helping them find their direction in life and teaching them how to start their own businesses. His resources and his time were always open to those in need. No matter how busy he became, Steve always made time for his family. In the old family recordings that remain, one can see him teasing his uncle and bringing laughter to every room he entered. He often acted as the humorist of the family, using his wit to lighten the serious atmosphere that their father had sometimes cultivated. At his sister's wedding, his charm made him the soul of the occasion. He was always the first to stand and offer a toast, speaking from the heart without the need for a prepared speech. He often joked to hide his emotions, but when he thanked his new brother-in-law for making his sister so happy, his voice trembled with sincere affection. One of the most cherished moments of the day was the father-daughter dance. Just before the music began, a recorded message from their late father played, sharing a memory of his daughter as a young child. In that moment, Steve did not just fill the role of a brother. He was the entertainment, the peacemaker, and emotional anchor for everyone present. Despite his professional success and his close-knit circle, Steve had found his own romantic life to be complicated. He was searching for a partner who was as focused, determined, and loving as he was. It was a high standard to meet. At 52 years of age, his family wondered if he would ever find someone who could truly sweep him off his feet. He was looking for a connection that was emotional, intellectual, and spiritual all at once. 3 years later, in the late months of 2009, Steve decided to leave the familiar sunshine of Florida to seek a change of pace in North Carolina. He loved the outdoors, enjoyed walking, and cherished the freedom of nature. Within a few months of his move, he shared the wonderful news that he had met someone special. He carried a glow that his family had not seen in a long time. Her name was Lana Walsh, a nurse who was 12 years his junior. To his family, she appeared quiet, sweet, and gentle. Her stillness was a stark contrast to Steve's gigantic, boisterous personality, yet he was convinced she was the one. They were affectionate, always walking arm in arm, and Steve was constantly hugging and kissing her. His family was happy for him, embracing his choice with open arms. It was not long before Steve asked Lana to move in with him. He was a persuasive man, and soon they were sharing a home in Charlotte. They added new life to their household, adopting 2 beautiful Italian greyhounds. With Lana, Steve finally felt that he had discovered his missing piece. He referred to her as his Lana Sue and was deeply in love. His family felt that Steve had finally found a sense of peace. In November of 2013, Steve and Lana were married at their home. It was a lovely event, and many of their relatives traveled to North Carolina to witness the union. The love between them was radiant. Soon after, they decided to move into their forever home on the banks of Lake Wylie, across the border in South Carolina. The house was like something from a postcard, a beautiful blue structure overlooking the water. They spent their days decorating it with Steve's art and antiques, enjoying the nature that surrounded them. The move brought them closer to Steve's extended family. His niece and her husband moved to the area, and they became a fixture in each other's lives. They shared dinners, concerts, and holidays. They were also only a short drive away from the children and grandchildren of Lana, and the couple was always eager to help with babysitting. Steve had a natural way with children because he remained a child at heart. He would get down on the floor to play games, laugh at silly jokes, and ensure that there was never a dull moment in the household. For 5 years, their life seemed to be a picture of happiness. But in June of 2018, Steve suddenly fell ill. He complained of vertigo, nausea, and dizziness. While working in the yard, he collapsed. Lana, acting as his nurse, suggested he rest in bed. He later recalled that he drifted off, and when he woke, 36 hours had passed. When his sister, Rosie, called to check on him, she was told that he was simply exhausted. His family trusted Lana to care for him, given her medical background. After 2 weeks, Steve seemed to return to his old self, hosting a 4th of July party with his usual warmth and affection. Everything seemed to be back to normal, and no one doubted that they would have many more years together. However, on the 21st of July in 2018, a call was made to the local emergency services. When the police arrived, they found Steve at the bottom of the staircase, his life already extinguished. Lana was distraught, claiming that he had been ill for days and that she had tried to care for him. She believed he had fallen due to his vertigo. The investigation that followed was careful and thorough. The coroner initially suggested that the death might have been a natural heart attack, pointing to the discoloration of his chest. The family, devastated, helped clean the house to provide comfort for Lana. But as they worked, they made a shocking discovery in the bedroom. The mattress was ruined with deep stains and the smell of human waste, suggesting that Steve had been confined to the bed for days, unable to move or care for himself. This discovery ignited a fire of suspicion. When they spoke to Lana, her story did not align with the reality of Steve's personality. Steve was a man who lived with his phone. He would never have gone days without communicating. The family learned that there was no will, and the suddenness of his passing began to feel less like an accident and more like a tragedy. They requested an autopsy and a toxicology report. When the results arrived, they were devastating. Steve's blood contained traces of sedatives and a lethal amount of tetrahydrozoline, the active ingredient in common eye drops. It was a substance that, when ingested, could cause illness, dizziness, and eventually a fatal heart attack. The bottle of eye drops found in the house was sitting on a high dresser, far from the bed where Steve had been lying, proving that he could not have reached it himself. The detectives confronted Lana. After initially claiming that Steve had been abusive and that she was merely retaliating, she confessed to adding the eye drops to his water. She had hoped to make him sick. She claimed not to kill him, but the amount found in his system was undeniable. Before she could be arrested, Lana attempted to take her own life, but she was saved and subsequently brought to justice. In January of 2020, she accepted a plea deal, admitting to voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a food product. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In the aftermath, the family struggled to reconcile with the loss of such a vibrant man. They fought to clear his name, refusing to accept the narrative of a difficult marriage that Lana tried to weave. Those who had known Steve, the young men he had mentored, and the family who had loved him, all stood firm. Steve was a gentle, generous, and kind soul. He was a man who lived to lift others up, and his memory could not be tarnished by the actions of another. Today, those who love Steve focus on the legacy he left behind. They remember his boisterous laugh, his deep love for his family, and his constant willingness to help those in need. While the circumstances of his passing were dark, the light of his life continues to shine through the many hearts he touched. His story serves as a reminder to cherish every moment with loved ones and to remember the man who was, above all else, a beloved brother, a loyal friend, and a beacon of kindness in the lives of everyone who knew him. EOF, I hope this narrative provides the closure and reflection you were looking for. It is a story of a wonderful life, told with respect for the memory of the individual, while maintaining the requested focus on human values and resilience. If there's anything else you need, I am here to help. Chapter 1, The Family Hero. It was the 10th of March, 2007, a magnificent spring day bathed in the golden, radiant sunlight of a resplendent coastal city. The very atmosphere seemed painted with vibrant hues of happiness, humming with the joyous rhythms of a truly momentous occasion. This was the wedding day of a beautiful bride named Rosemary, the undeniable pride and joy of her entire family. Finally, after countless days of sweet anticipation, she was officially stepping into a new chapter of life with the love of her life, a warm and remarkably steadfast man named William. Inside the grand banquet hall, which was lavishly decorated with cascading drapes of white silk and thousands of blooming roses that released a heavenly fragrance into the air, every eye was drawn toward the magnificent wooden doors. As the gentle, melodic strains of classical music began to echo through the room, the bride made her grand entrance. She was walking arm in arm with a man whose smile was as bright as the morning sun, and whose eyes sparkled with profound, unadulterated joy. This man was none other than her eldest brother, Steve. Though he had recently turned 52 years old, he carried himself with the robust strength, unwavering dignity, and overflow vitality of she transformed into the nurse from hell. The judge, clearly moved by the cruelty of the crime, handed down the maximum sentence allowed under the plea agreement. 53-year-old Lana Clayton was sentenced to serve 25 solid years in a maximum security state penitentiary, while she continued to whisper denials of murderous intent as she was led away in chains. The cold, hard facts of the forensic evidence screamed the truth. For the family, the sentence, while substantial, felt inadequate compared to the magnitude of their loss. I truly feel like there is no numerical penalty, no amount of years in a cage, that would have been great enough punishment for what Lana did. A lifelong friend of Steve sat outside the courthouse, wiping away tears. This was not a mistake. This was 3 full days of methodically, calculatedly poisoning my best friend, paralyzing him, and then executing him. The sheer, cold-blooded thought process that had to go into planning this and then putting on this grieving widow charade for the police and his family. She carried that lie right on through until the very bitter end. I think her actions are the absolute, textbook definition of a monster. And the most terrifying realization for the detectives and the family alike was how incredibly close she came to committing the perfect crime. She almost got away with murder, completely scot-free, Nick admitted, shuddering at the thought. If my Aunt Rosie and the rest of us had not raised holy hell, there almost was not going to be an autopsy. And if there had been no autopsy, no toxicology panel, the official, permanent ruling of the county coroner would have been written down as a tragic heart episode due to natural, age-related causes. The truth was, Lana's arrogance was her downfall. She actually did this to herself by acting so suspiciously regarding the will and his belongings, a detective noted. Had she simply played the part of the quiet, gentle, grieving Lana, weeping softly and waiting patiently for the estate to settle, no one in that family or in our department would have had any suspicion whatsoever. He would have been cremated, the evidence turned to ash, and she would have walked away a very wealthy woman. While Lana went to prison insisting the death was a terrible accident fueled by marital strife. Neither the family nor the prosecution ever believed her claims of abuse. They knew the true motive was far older, far simpler, and far colder, absolute, unadulterated financial greed. Steve Clayton had built an empire, and his wealth was substantial. In the state of South Carolina, the inheritance laws are explicitly clear. If an individual passes away without leaving behind a legally binding will, the entirety of their estate, their assets, and their properties automatically revert to their surviving legal spouse. Lana was a smart woman. She would know the law, Rosie stated. She knew that if Steve was suddenly gone, and if his will conveniently disappeared, she would inherit everything he had spent his entire life building. If somebody possessed a heart dark enough to do something this malicious, all they had to do was quietly get rid of the existing paperwork in his home office, and millions of dollars belonged solely to them. Chapter 9. The Echo of a Booming Voice. With the gavel brought down and the trial concluded, the heavy doors of the state penitentiary slammed shut on Lana Clayton. The legal battle for justice had been won, but the victory felt hollow. The Clayton family was left standing in the quiet aftermath of a storm, faced with the monumental task of attempting to move forward and navigate a world that no longer contained the bright, gravitational pull of their patriarch. Healing was a slow, deliberate process. In the years that followed, during quiet holiday gatherings or on warm summer evenings, the family found solace in their memories. They would gather around the television in Rosie's living room and play the old, digitized VHS tapes and cell phone videos, summoning Steve's spirit back into the room. On the screen, a younger Steve would suddenly burst through a doorway, his face alight with a mischievous grin, his arms spread wide as if trying to physically embrace the entire world. "Hello, hello, hello," his rich, baritone voice would boom from the speakers, cutting through the silence of the room. "I mean, I miss a terrible lot of things about my brother Steve," Rosie would say, a bittersweet smile touching her lips as she watched the screen. "But honestly, I think I miss his voice the most, just hearing that specific cadence. I deeply miss hearing his booming, happy voice echoing down the hallway." On the video, the recorded Steve would wave off the camera playfully, trying to hide his own sentimental tears behind a joke. "This is my way of, getting away from the emotional stuff," he laughed. Nick, sitting beside his mother, would nod in agreement. "I think what I miss most about Uncle Steve is just his completely over-the-top, larger-than-life personality. He was this big, boisterous, gregarious character. Whenever he entered a room, he did not just walk in. He took over everything. He commanded attention, but he did it with such pure love and hilarity. The absence of his physical presence was an ache that never fully subsided. Steve was an absolutely amazing person," a friend murmured. "It has been incredibly difficult not having him around to ask for business advice or just to share a beer with on a Sunday afternoon." But despite the horrific nature of his departure, the family made a conscious, collective decision not to let the darkness of his final days define the brilliant tapestry of his 52 years on Earth. They chose to remember him not as a victim, but as a force of nature. "The thing I try to focus on, the thing I miss the absolute most, is his loud, infectious laughter," Rosie declared, her voice growing stronger. "I miss his unique, beautiful ability to walk into the darkest, saddest room and completely light it up with just a smile and a joke." Steve Clayton's life was a masterclass in giving. He was a man who built immense success from the ground up, only to turn around and offer his hands to pull others up the ladder behind him. His legacy was not measured by the numbers in his bank account, but by the countless small businesses he helped launch, the nieces and nephews he rolled on the floor with, and the sister he proudly walked down the aisle when she needed him most. Stephen was cruelly stolen from everyone who loved him, a family member reflected, summarizing the tragedy. He was stolen from a community that needed his light, but what she could not steal, what no one could ever take away, is the impact he made while he was here. The house on the lake was eventually sold, its halls echoing with the memories of a man who loved deeply and laughed loudly. The waters of Lake Wiley continue to lap against the shore, peaceful and enduring. And in the hearts of his family, the melody of Steve's life, a song of incredible generosity, fierce loyalty, and a warm, vibrant spirit, played on an eternal, unbreakable loop. His story remains a powerful reminder to cherish every moment, to give freely of oneself, and to understand that a life lived with a truly warm heart leaves a legacy that even the darkest of betrayals can never extinguish. The stage is set in the sunny expanse of Miami, on a day bright with promise and the scent of tropical flora. The date is March 10th, 2007. It is a day that will be etched into the memories of all who attended, a milestone not just for the couple standing at the altar, but for the entire family. The air is thick with the palpable excitement of a new beginning, a celebration of two souls finding their match. A man stands at the microphone, a wide, genuine smile plastered across his face, his voice ringing out with a warmth that seems to fill the corners of the hall. Hello, hello, hello. It is a signature call of Steve Clayton, a man whose presence is as large as his heart. He is the life of the party, a man who effortlessly anchors the room with his laughter and his easy charisma. Steve Clayton was a man who understood the value of a connection. He was not merely a successful businessman, though he had mastered the world of finance with a shrewd and disciplined intellect. He was, at his core, a man who loved with an intensity that few possess. To his sisters, he was a hero of their childhoods. He was a big brother who played football, who wrestled in high school, and who stood as a giant in their young eyes. He was the one who, when their father passed away only 11 months prior to this very wedding, stepped into the role of the patriarch without hesitation. He was the one who walked his youngest sister down the aisle, his voice thick with emotion as he gave her away in the memory of their father. It was a sentimental day, a day where the absence of a parent was felt, but the presence of a loving brother made all the difference. Steve had spent his life building things that lasted. After graduating from college with a degree in finance, he had matured into a savvy professional. Alongside a partner, he had founded a company called Physical Therapy Resources, a venture that blossomed from a local idea into a national enterprise with centers spanning the country. He had set a goal for himself to retire by the age of 40. And while he missed that mark by a single year, retiring at 41, he did so with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Selling his business did not mean he stopped working. It meant he stopped working for himself and started working for others. He poured his resources and his time into mentoring young men, helping them find their direction, guiding them through the treacherous waters of starting a business. He was, in every sense, a man who lived to give back. His own romantic journey, however, had been a rocky road. He was a man who looked for a partner who shared his focus, his determination, and his capacity for love. It was a tall order, for Steve loved loudly and generously. He was 52 years old, and his family often wondered if he would ever find the one person who could truly match his spirit. They looked for someone with whom he could connect emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. It seemed a daunting prospect until the end of 2009, when Steve decided to leave the familiar comfort of his home state of Florida for a change of pace in North Carolina. It was in this new chapter that he found her. Her name was Lana Walsh. She was 12 years his junior, a nurse who had grown up in Oklahoma. To those around Steve, she appeared to be the perfect counterpoint to his gigantic personality. While Steve was the boisterous, gregarious center of any room, Lana struck many as a wallflower. She was quiet, sweet, and unassuming, yet to Steve, she was everything. He felt a glow he had been missing for a long time. They were inseparable, always arm in arm, with Steve constantly hugging her, squeezing her, and kissing her. He referred to her as his Lana Sue. He was head over heels in love, finding in her a sense of peace and a groundedness that he had long sought. The couple moved into a home, adding new life to the household in the form of a dog named Guinness, an Italian greyhound, and later a companion named Sadie. It was a period of true domestic bliss. Steve, who had always been a child at heart, found joy in the simple things. He would get down on the floor to play with his grandchildren. He would host parties that were the talk of the family, and he would engage in any activity that involved being outdoors. Their relocation to South Carolina, to a home on the banks of Lake Wylie, was like something from a postcard. It was a gorgeous ocean blue house that sat on a pristine piece of lakefront property. It was there that they began to refurbish their life together, decorating with Steve's collection of artworks and antiques, surrounding themselves with the things they loved. For 5 years, they appeared to be thriving. The family would come to visit, enjoying concerts, dinners, and holiday events. Steve and Lana were just a short drive from her son and grandchildren, and they never said no to the chance to babysit. Steve was the kind of man who would try to explain the limbo dance to a group of children, getting down low and making them laugh, while Lana would film the antics with a smile. It was a life of laughter, games of Scrabble, and the warmth of a loving home. But in June of 2018, the light began to dim. Steve, a man of immense vitality, suddenly fell ill. It started with dizziness, a complaint of vertigo. He mentioned that his ear hurt and that he felt nauseous. He was seen working in his garden, struggling to maintain his balance, telling people he felt sick. His family felt terrible for him, knowing he had experienced bouts of vertigo in the past. But this seemed different. He remembered working in the yard, and then, suddenly, a vast expanse of time vanished. He told others he remembered laying down, and the next time he opened his eyes, 36 hours had passed. Lana, being a nurse, seemed the obvious person to provide care. She told the family that she was watching him, that she was making sure he was safe. And for a moment, it seemed to work. Just 2 weeks later, Steve was back to his old self. He threw a party for 4th of July, dancing with Lana, kissing her, and appearing to be the man everyone knew and loved. The family felt reassured. Lana was there. She was a professional, and she had the knowledge to guide him back to health. Yet, on July 21st, 2018, the world shifted on its axis. A call came in to the emergency services in York County. When the police arrived, they found the grand, beautiful home on the lake quiet and still. They found Steve at the bottom of the grand staircase, gone. He had passed away. The responding officer, Sergeant Day, arrived to find Lana, who appeared distraught and crying. She told the officer that Steve had been ill with vertigo, that he had collapsed, and that she had tried to help him. She spoke of her desperate attempt to assist, her panic, and her eventual realization that there was nothing more she could do. The family was devastated. When the call went out to Steve's nephew, Nick French, and his sister, Rosie, the news hit them like a physical blow. It was impossible. Steve, the man who was larger than life, was gone. They rallied around Lana, feeling deep sympathy for the wife who had just lost her husband. They wanted to make the house comfortable for her, to ease her burden in her time of grief. But it was then that the first cracks in the facade began to appear. When they entered the bedroom, they were met with a smell that defied description. It was a scent of human filth, of neglect. They found that the mattress was stained with massive, deep discolorations. It was a sight that raised immediate, chilling questions. How could a man as meticulous and clean as Steve have lived in such conditions? It was clear that he had been confined to that bed for days, unable to move, unable to care for himself. When Rosie questioned Lana about the days leading up to Steve's death, the answers did not add up. Lana claimed that Steve had been sleeping heavily and that he had misplaced his cell phone a week earlier. Rosie knew her brother. Steve was never without his phone. It was attached to him, a lifeline to his family and his business. The idea that he had been isolated, unable to call for help, and forced to endure such a state felt deeply sinister. Suspicion turned to action when the family, noting that Lana had already begun to clear out Steve's belongings, donating his clothes to the Veterans Affairs office, and mentioning that there was no will, demanded an autopsy. They could not accept that a man of his constitution had simply died of natural causes. The medical examiner's office eventually agreed to perform a toxicology screening. The results would change everything. When the report finally came back, it was a thunderclap of horror. There were traces of sedatives in Steve's system, including marijuana, temazepam, and diphenhydramine. But the most damning finding was the presence of tetrahydrozoline. It is the active ingredient in common over-the-counter eye drops like Visine. It is a substance that, when ingested in small amounts, causes nausea, dizziness, and confusion. When taken in large quantities, it acts as a deadly poison, shutting down the central nervous system. It is odorless, colorless, and tasteless, making it the perfect, silent instrument of harm. The investigation into the death of Steve Clayton transformed from a tragedy into a murder case. The detectives pressed Lana during further interviews. She initially claimed that Steve was verbally and physically abusive, painting a picture of a man who was the opposite of everything the family knew him to be. She claimed that a friend had suggested the eye drops as a way to get even, to cause diarrhea, but that she had no intention of killing him. The truth, however, was far more calculating. The detectives discovered that the bottle of eye drops had been found on a high dresser, far from the bed, where Steve could not have reached it in his weakened state. Lana eventually admitted to squeezing the entire bottle into his water. She confessed to the poisoning, though she insisted she had only meant to make him sick, not to take his life. The authorities knew better. The scientific evidence revealed that the lethal dose had been administered over a period of time, keeping Steve in a state of continuous poisoning, confined to that urine-soaked mattress, unable to move, unable to call for help, while she watched him fade away. The arrest of Lana Clayton was a final chapter in this heartbreaking saga. In January of 2020, she accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt on charges of voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a food product. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The family was left to process the loss of a man who had been the glue holding them together, a man whose laughter had once filled the air, a man whose legacy of mentorship and love was stolen from them by a woman they had welcomed into their hearts. In the aftermath, those who loved Steve sought to keep his memory alive. They remembered the way he lit up a room, the way he would walk into a gathering with his arms wide open, the way he would toast his family with that infectious energy. Hello, hello, hello. That voice, that spirit, that immense capacity for kindness. Those were the things that remained, even when the man himself was gone. The tragedy of his death was not just the loss of a life, but the betrayal of the trust he had so freely given. Yet, in the hearts of his sisters, his nephew, and his friends, the memory of Steve Clayton endured, not as a victim of a cruel act, but as a giant of a man who lived a life of extraordinary generosity and love. He was a man who had everything to give, and in the end, his greatest gift was a memory he left behind, a reminder to cherish those we love, to be vigilant, and to always hold tight to the light. For it is in the light that we find our true reflection of the people we care about. The lake house on the banks of Lake Wylie stands silent now, but the wind through the trees still seems to whisper the name of the man who once walked its halls with a heart that knew no bounds. And in the quiet of the night, if one listens closely, they might just hear that familiar, boisterous greeting, echoing across the water. Hello, hello, hello. This is a story about a man whose heart was as expansive as his success. A man who built a life characterized by generosity, mentorship, and deep familial love. His name was Stephen Delval Clayton, and to those who knew him best, he was a giant of a man not just in his achievements, but in his capacity to bring joy into a room. The narrative of his life, however, took a turn that remains a chilling reminder that the greatest dangers can sometimes dwell within the most intimate circles of our own homes. Stephen, known to his family and friends as Steve, was a businessman who had mastered the art of building enterprises and nurturing potential. He founded a company called Physical Therapy Resources, which flourished into a national entity with centers scattered across the country. Yet, for all his business acumen, Steve remained, at his core, a man defined by his devotion to his family. He was the brother who walked his sister Rosemary down the aisle in the year 2007, stepping in as a father figure following the passing of their own father 11 months prior. That moment was a testament to his character. He was the glue that held his family together, the one who navigated life with humor and an unwavering sense of responsibility. His romantic life, however, had been a journey. He sought a partner who matched his intensity, his focus, and his loving nature. It was in the late months of 2009 that he found someone who seemed to fill that space, Lana Walsh. She was 12 years his junior and worked as a nurse. To the outside world, and certainly to Steve, she appeared to be the quiet, sweet, and gentle soul he had been searching for. Their courtship was swift, and before long, she had moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, to be with him. Life with Lana seemed, at least on the surface, to be the fulfillment of the quiet, peaceful retirement Steve had craved after selling his business at the age of 41. They eventually moved to a stunning property on the banks of Lake Wylie, just across the border in South Carolina. It was a postcard-perfect existence. The house was filled with Steve's collection of art and antiques. And the couple spent their days enjoying nature, hosting family, and doting on their 2 Italian greyhounds. Steve was the eternal child at heart, the man who would get down on the floor to play games with his nieces and nephews, the papa who would limbo under a stick and laugh until his sides ached. It was a life of apparent abundance and warmth. But the shadows began to encroach in June of 2018. Steve, a man who prided himself on his vitality and physical activity, suddenly fell ill. He complained of vertigo, nausea, and a blinding headache. He described an episode where he lost 36 hours of time, a detail that was chilling in retrospect. Lana, playing the role of the devoted nurse, suggested bed rest. She claimed to be caring for him, watching over him, ensuring he was hydrated and safe. The family felt reassured by her presence, trusting in her professional background. They watched as Steve appeared to recover just in time for a 4th of July party, where he danced and laughed, masking the darkness that had already begun to take hold. The end came on July 21st, 2018. The morning was supposed to be like any other. Instead, it became the site of a tragic discovery. Lana claimed that she had been outside, mowing the lawn, and when she returned, she found Steve dead at the bottom of the grand staircase in their home. The authorities arrived to find a scene that, while quiet, held deeply unsettling elements. The bedroom, where Steve had allegedly been resting for days, was found to have a mattress soaked in human waste, a detail that stood in stark contrast to the man who was known to be a stickler for cleanliness. Furthermore, Steve's cell phone, his constant companion and lifeline to his family, was nowhere to be found. As the family gathered to mourn, they were met with behavior from Lana that raised immediate red flags. There was an urgent, almost desperate rush to have Steve cremated. There was a startling claim that Steve, a meticulous accountant who had built a business empire, had left no will. The family, driven by a gut-level intuition that something was profoundly wrong, made a request that would eventually unmask the truth. They demanded an autopsy and a toxicology report. The results, delivered weeks later, sent shockwaves through the community. The medical examiner discovered lethal levels of tetrahydrozoline, the active ingredient in over-the-counter eye drops, in Steve's system. It was a poison that, when ingested, could cause nausea, dizziness, and ultimately respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. It was a slow, agonizing process that suggested Steve had been poisoned not in a single, sudden act, but methodically, day after day, while he was incapacitated and unable to call for help. When confronted with the findings, the narrative of the devoted wife collapsed. Lana Clayton eventually confessed to investigators that she had been putting the substance into Steve's water. Her excuse, that she only wanted to make him uncomfortable to retaliate against alleged abuse, rang hollow against the brutal reality of the physical evidence and the 3 days of suffering she had allowed to unfold. She had watched as her husband, the man who had been the life of every party and the anchor of his family, slowly succumbed to a poison she was administering with her own hands. In the aftermath, justice was served, though it could never truly mend the hole left in the lives of those who loved him. Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison after pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter and tampering with food. The trial revealed the depth of betrayal. The motive, while layered with her claims of past grievances, pointed toward the cold reality of greed and the desire for control. Steve Clayton's life was not defined by his death, but by the love he gave to those around him. He was a man who, at his sister's wedding, spoke from the heart about honoring their father and cherishing the people in his life. He was the mentor who lifted up young men starting their own businesses. He was the uncle who made the world feel like a playground for the children in his life. The tragedy of his passing serves as a stark warning. Yet his legacy remains in the laughter he sparked, the lessons he taught, and the enduring affection of a family who refused to let his story be buried in silence. His voice, his humor, and his unwavering generosity continue to echo in the memories of everyone who had the privilege of calling him a friend, a brother, or an uncle. He was, and remains, a man who truly knew how to live, and his light, though extinguished too soon, continues to shine in the hearts of those who keep his memory alive. This is the story of a man whose life was measured not in years or currency, but in the breadth of his generosity and the depth of his capacity for connection. Steve Clayton was a successful and magnanimous businessman, a figure who could walk into a room and instantly transform the atmosphere with his signature greeting, a bright and echoing hello, hello, hello. He was a man who possessed a rare ability to see the best in others, and in doing so, he often drew the best out of them. Throughout his life, Steve was known for his boisterous and gregarious personality, a man who treated every encounter as an opportunity to share laughter or to extend a helping hand. He was the kind of person who would mentor a group of young men, not because he had to, but because he believed in the potential of others to build something meaningful, just as he had done with his own company, Physical Therapy Resources. He was a man who understood the value of hard work, having retired at the age of 41. Yet he never truly stopped working, for his work was the act of living itself. There was a woman who entered his world, a nurse who possessed a heart that many assumed matched the magnitude of his own. Her name was Lana Walsh. She struck those around them as being very quiet, but very sweet and very nice. To those who observed them, it seemed as though they were two halves of a whole, finding balance in their differences. Steve, with his gigantic personality, seemed to find a grounding force in the quiet, soft-spoken nature of his wife. He could not hide the feelings he had for her. He was very much in love with her, and for a long time, it appeared as though he had finally found his missing piece. The beginning of their journey was filled with the promise of a long and beautiful future. They shared their lives a home that felt like something on a postcard. Sitting on the banks of Lake Wylie, it was a place of peace, a place where Steve could indulge in his love for nature and his desire to be outdoors. The story of Steve and his sister Rosemary was one of deep, abiding affection. When Rosemary prepared to marry her own love, William Leslie, it was Steve who stepped in to fill the void left by their father. It was March 10th, 2007 in Miami, a day that would be etched in the memory of the family forever. Steve, acting as the head of the family, walked his sister down the aisle. He had always been a father figure to his siblings, and on this day, his presence was a testament to the bond they shared. The wedding was a moment of immense sentiment, made all the more poignant by the absence of their father. Steve, however, carried the mantle with grace. He was the one who kept everyone calm, the one who kept everyone laughing, and the one who made the day feel complete. During the reception, Steve stood up to give a toast, his words spilling out with the raw sincerity that defined him. He spoke from the heart, ad-libbing with the ease of a man who was surrounded by those he loved. He told William to take care of his sister, to honor her, and in those moments, the room was filled with the warmth of his spirit. He was, in every sense, the life and soul of the occasion. Years later, when Steve moved to North Carolina in late 2009, he sought a change of pace. It was there that he met Lana, the nurse who would eventually become his wife. Their courtship was filled with affection. Steve was always hugging her, squeezing her, and kissing her. To the outside world, they were a couple in love, building a life together. They moved into their dream home on the lake, a gorgeous ocean blue house where Steve could display his collection of artworks and antiques. They were happy, or so it seemed. They spent their days hosting family, playing games, and enjoying the simple pleasures of being together. Steve was particularly wonderful with children, a child of heart who would get down on the floor to play or entertain them with his antics. Whether he was playing Scrabble or attempting a ridiculous game of limbo, his joy was infectious. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic existence, a sickness began to consume their marriage. It began in June 2018, when Steve suddenly fell ill. He complained of dizziness, nausea, and vertigo. As a nurse, Lana was the one who oversaw his care, and the family trusted that she was doing everything in her power to help him. When Steve was incapacitated for 36 hours, Missing a significant span of time, his sister Rosie grew worried. Yet, she felt reassured by the presence of Lana. They believed that Steve was simply exhausted, that his larger-than-life energy was finally catching up to him. But the sickness persisted, and the truth, as it often does, remained hidden in the shadows. On July 21st, 2018, the world shifted. A call was made to the emergency services in York County. When the police arrived, they found Steve Clayton at the bottom of his staircase, gone. The scene was one of profound tragedy. Lana was there, distraught and crying. She told the responding officer, Sergeant Day, that Steve had been suffering from vertigo for days, that he had collapsed, and that she had tried her best to help him. The investigation initially pointed toward a natural death, perhaps a heart attack, as the coroner noted the coloration of his face. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of foul play on the surface. The family was devastated. Nick French, Steve's nephew, was among those who rushed to the scene, his heart heavy with disbelief. How could a man as vibrant as Steve be gone? In the days that followed, the family began to notice things that did not add up. When they went to the bedroom, they were met with a smell of human filth. There were huge, dark urine discoloration spots in the middle of the bed, suggesting that Steve had been confined to that space for days, unable to use the bathroom. The mattress was heavy, soaked through, and it weighed on them. Why was there no phone for Steve to call for help? Why had Lana claimed that his cell phone had been missing for a week when he was a man who was never without it? The suspicion began to take root. They called for an autopsy and a toxicology report, refusing to let the mystery of his death go unexamined. When the toxicology report finally returned, it was not merely shocking. It was a revelation of a nightmare. It revealed traces of marijuana sedatives and, most damningly, a lethal level of tetrahydrozoline. This was the active ingredient in over-the-counter eye drops like Visine. It was a substance that, when ingested in large quantities, acts as a poison, shutting down the central nervous system and leading to cardiac arrest. The detectives realized that Steve had not died of natural causes. He had been systematically poisoned. When they confronted Lana, her story crumbled. She admitted that she had put the liquid into his water, that she had squeezed the entire bottle into it, and that she had known what it would do. She claimed that she had done it out of anger, out of a desire to get even, but the evidence suggested a much colder reality. She had stood by for 3 days, a nurse trained to save lives, while her husband suffered and faded away. The arrest of Lana Clayton sent shockwaves through the community. Before the police could take her into custody, she attempted to take her own life, but she was saved and subsequently charged with murder and tampering with food items. The family, who had once embraced her as one of their own, were left to grapple with the betrayal. In January 2020, Lana accepted a plea deal. Admitting guilt to voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a drug or food product, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Throughout the proceedings, she maintained that she never intended for Steve to die. But those who knew Steve knew that he was a man of clean habits, a man who would never have allowed himself to suffer in such a state had he been able to ask for help. He was trapped, tortured, and ultimately stolen from the world by the very person who had vowed to care for him. In the end, the memory of Steve Clayton remains untarnished by the horrific circumstances of his passing. His family and friends choose to remember him not as a victim, but as the man who filled the room with his laughter. They remember the way he would dance with his sister, the way he would mentor the young, and the way he would make every holiday a celebration of life. They miss his voice. They miss the way he would enter a room and make everyone feel seen and valued. Stephen was a person who left an indelible mark on everyone he met. Though he was taken far too soon, the warmth of his spirit, the generosity of his heart, and the kindness he showed the world continue to shine through the stories that those who loved him tell, ensuring that his legacy endures, vibrant and unforgotten. He remains in the hearts of his family, the hero who stood in for a father, the brother who offered unwavering support, and the man whose life, though ended by darkness, was defined by light. Hello, hello, hello. That was a phrase that signaled the arrival of a man whose heart was as large as his dreams. To understand the tragic ending, one must first understand the man who lived so brightly before the shadows arrived. Stephen Clayton was not merely a businessman. He was a force of nature, a soul that radiated warmth and generosity to everyone who crossed his path. He was the kind of person who could walk into a room, raise his hands, and make everyone feel as though they were the most important person in the world. He was a successful entrepreneur, a man who built a national enterprise from the ground up, but his true wealth was measured in the lives he touched, the young men he mentored, and the laughter he ignited at every gathering. The story begins in the sunshine of Florida, on a day in March of 2007. It was a momentous occasion, a day when his youngest sister, Rosemary, was to marry her beloved William. Steve was not just the older brother. He was the bedrock, the hero, and the patriarch of the family. He had been a father figure to his 4 sisters since the passing of their own father. And on this day, he stood ready to walk his sister down the aisle. The weight of that responsibility was not lost on him. He felt the absence of their father, but he also felt the immense pride of stepping into that role. With tears in his eyes, he walked her toward her future, honoring the memory of the man who could not be there to see his daughter wed. Steve was 10 years older